I'm not broadcasting, it's just recording. Okay, so verse 6, and without faith it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. We're in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 7. Ready? By faith Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark to save his family. By his faith he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. Verse 8, by faith Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. By faith Abraham, even though he was past age, remember he was old, and Sarah herself was barren, was enabled to become a father, because he considered him faithful who had made the promise. And so from this one man, and he as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as countless as the sands on the seashore. All these people were still living by faith when they died. Get what he's saying there? They died, but they were still alive. They were living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance. And they admitted that they were aliens and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. This is going on to talk about what we know now about salvation. Skip on down to verse 17. By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had received the promise was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, "It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned." Abraham reasoned that God could raise the dead, and figuratively speaking, he did raise Isaac back from the dead. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau in regard to their future. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons, and now we're going to go on to things we haven't gotten to yet. So when we look at this scripture, we're going to be back over in Genesis, and we're reading about Jacob and what happened with Esau and Jacob. What is faith? What is it that God is commending with all these people? It's certainly not decisiveness or wisdom or lying. They lied. They had multiple wives. They were supposed to have one wife. They had multiple, right? But what is it they're being commended for? Their belief, they believed that God was going to do what he said he was going to do, right? And they acted on that. They moved to the land that he said to go to. They dug wells where God said to make the home. Even though you're out in the middle of the desert, what are you going to do? You're going to dig some wells. That's what Isaac did. It's about the only thing we really know of record that he did was dig wells. But that's a big deal, because that's where cities were established around those wells. That's owning that land. And so we see their actions that they do, these things that they do, they acted on their belief that God was going to do what he said he was going to do. Now, sometimes God had to go to extreme measures in order to prevent the promise from being messed up. They didn't understand the whole thing of Christ. We looking back, we look from where we are, looking back, we can see, that God was protecting to make sure that it was the right person all along the way leading to Christ. We could see that. They couldn't see it at that time, right? They didn't know that, but they were faithfully doing what God said to do, not understanding. And even that one town where none of the men could do the deed.
You had to protect the sisters.
God found a way to make sure that it didn't get messed up with them. They kept saying, "Oh, this is Sarah, my sister Sarah. Meet my sister Sarah." Yeah, but God made sure that his plan was protected all the way through, even though we have some weird guys. So then, just before we go back now to Genesis, what do we do if we are living a life of faith? What does it look like? We see that in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 22. Ready? He's telling us what to do if we are going to have that faith. Let us draw near to God with a sincere heart in full assurance of faith, having a heart sprinkled to cleanse us from guilt. So what do we do? Number one, draw near to God. And what allows us to draw near? That we have a sincerity, or we understand that we are forgiven for things that we've not done well or right. That forgiveness falls into play. Otherwise, you can't draw near to God. It becomes a barrier. When your sin is a barrier between you and God, then you have not accepted his forgiveness, because he has no barrier about it. He forgave you. So to be sincere, to be true, transparent, to be able to be with God, you have to believe that he really did forgive you. That's faith. Believing that as bad as I am, that God forgave me for those things, allows me to draw near to God. What gets in the way of me drawing near to God? Guilt. Really guilty that I'm not forgiven. That I did something wrong I shouldn't have done. That becomes a barrier. Look down at verse 23. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. Let us not give up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching, day with a capital D, the end of time. So if you were going to say, what are we supposed to be doing now? I think you could take those verses. That's a really great summary of how we're supposed to live today to express our faith. That's what we should be doing with our faith. Nice summary. We're going to come back to Hebrews 11 multiple times, okay? So when we get back into this silly behavior that we see people doing in the text, we're going to have to keep reminding ourselves that this is a path that we're on, and these people are not models for us, except in terms of faith, that they acted on what they knew. Okay.
I think they actually help us to get past that feeling sometimes of I'm unworthy, because we see God's forgiveness and how it played out in the lives of these people. If we didn't have that.
Yeah, I might be bad, but I'm not as bad as Abraham.
And God forgave him,
yeah.
So there is help for me.
I really believe that is true, that we need to keep that in mind. So, okay, we are then on chapter 28. We're going to be starting at verse 10. And I want to remind you what has just occurred. Remember that Jacob has tricked his way through, and he tricked him out of the birthright with Esau. Esau and him had a conversation, and Esau came in hungry from hunting, and Jacob had made some lentil soup, and he wanted some, and he said, well, I'll do it for your birthright. And was Esau concerned about his birthright?
No.
The birthright was the promise from God, the one that God gave, right? That's the one that said you're going to be the heir. That becomes a barrier between Esau and God forever, because he flippantly disregarded his birthright. Now, did he get real mad at Jacob about that? Not really. Just a little perturbed. No big deal, right? Then we have the thing where Jacob put on the animal skin and disguised himself as Esau, and Jacob blessed Esau instead of Isaac blessed Jacob instead of Esau, right? We know that part. So what was bad about that? Did Esau care about that? Oh yeah. Now Esau cares. That his father blessed means that the family business, the inheritance, the lion's share of what they have built as their family is going to go to Esau. He wanted it to go to him because he's the oldest son. But instead, the blessing went to Jacob. Now, in the long run, we're going to see, because Jacob does go away, and he ends up being gone a long time. And so it ends up when he comes back, Esau is a very wealthy man. It's pretty much like he inherited all his father had because he was there in the land. So that kind of worked out. Maybe Esau's feathers soothed because of that, because later we know Esau does receive back Jacob. And maybe just the fact that he stayed there and inherited what was there, maybe that's what soothed him. We don't really know that for sure. So we'll just keep reading and see about it. Okay, so Jacob at this time, though, the mom comes up with a plan. Esau's so mad, he says, as soon as my dad dies, I'm killing Jacob. I'm getting rid of him. And so that was the plan. And so the mom knew about it. And so what she did is she said to her husband, she said, I am so sick and tired of these Hittite Canaanite women. I don't know what I'm going to do if these women marry, if Jacob marries one of these women from around here. She's just as conniving as all the rest of them. And then Isaac says, well, we could send him up to Padan Aram. That's where our family lives. Maybe he could find a wife there. And the wife says, oh, good idea. I'll send him tomorrow. So how clever of you to think of that. So he goes back he's on his way to Padan Aram. Now, I want to start as the rest of our reminder at chapter 28, verse 6. Because I want you to consider Esau's reaction. Okay, here's how Esau reacted to this, that his brother left to go marry somebody up there with the family. He says, now Esau learned that Isaac had blessed Jacob and had sent him to Padan Aram to take a wife from there, and that when he blessed him, he commanded him, do not marry a Canaanite woman, and that Jacob had obeyed his father and mother and had gone to Padan Aram. Esau then realized how displeasing the Canaanite women were to his father Isaac. So he went to Ishmael. Now, who's Ishmael? The son of Hagar, right? That got sent out, right? He was sent away from the rest of the family. Ishmael, and he had married an Egyptian, remember? So Ishmael's and married Mahalath, the sister of Nebaioth and daughter of Ishmael's son of Abraham, in addition to the wives he already had. Now, we look at that and we go, is that good or bad? I mean, was it a good choice? Was he trying to be pleasing or was he trying to be bad? He was trumping it. It was bad to marry a Canaanite, but then to marry a Canaanite Egyptian mixed descent, that was the half son of, that all thing, that was like trumping it. So Esau was mad. He was so mad, he said, well, you don't like my Canaanite wives? Well, I'll just show you. I'll go marry another one. We'll see how you think about that. So things are happy in the family, right? Everyone's getting along well. Christmas was a lot of fun. Fortunately, Christ had not been born yet, so that kind of saved him from that. But I want to show you where we're talking about here. It doesn't come up till later, but I don't know why. Oh, maybe that's, I don't see what it looks like. Come on. Okay. Okay, so Jacob then is going to Padan Aram. And remember on our map, he's going to end up, he's coming down here from the Negev desert, and he's going up this way, probably along the trade route. There's a trade route up here. Comes up through these hills and stuff. Anyway, he's going to come up from this Negev desert. He's going to end up at Bethel. And he's on his way to Padan Aram, which is where that Mesopotamian area was up here with the rivers coming down. Remember that Laban and them moved to? It's up there, way up there. And so that's where he's going to. Remember when the other wife came down, it was like 600 miles. When Rebecca came down, we said it was like 600 and something miles. It took him a month to travel. So it's quite a long journey that he's taking. Verse 10, Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. When he reached a certain place. Now, when we read this, we go, we don't really have a way to say this. In English, this is not the way we talk. But it's like saying it was a spot, like a spot that's going to get a new name, but it was a place. It wasn't just like he was randomly coming up here and he stopped and there was a place to make a camp. There is some sort of like a city or a place here that's known. And in fact, we do know that the place he stopped at before, he says later, was called Luz. and that was the name of a Canaanite cultic ritual city where they did cultic practices with the Canaanites, and it had long been left and not used at all. There were no people there. It was just left, but it was known for being this place where the Canaanite rituals had been taking place. So that's kind of why it says it this way. We don't get it when it says it, but when he reached a certain place, in other words, it was a place, but it wasn't really inhabited or currently in use, but it was a place that he stopped at. He stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth, with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. If you've read this in other versions, you might read a ladder, or you hear people talk about Jacob's ladder, songs and things. This is what it's talking about, this vision. But it was, the actual wording would tend to be more like steps, like a stairway, but not really a stairway, just that there were steps. So a lot of the artists will render it kind of like a stairway with no rail or sides or anything. It's just stairs going up rather than a ladder. But a lot of songs you'll hear the term Jacob's ladder. Verse 13, 12. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were descending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord. All caps, that's Jehovah. So he's seeing God. And he said, so the God says, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Okay, so that's right here. Right here. By Jericho, Jerusalem, Ai, Bethlehem, all that. This is all in this area here. I am the Lord your God, Father, the God of Isaac. I will give you your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. Now that's a weird one, right? None of them get that. We go back, like in Hebrews at that time, a time of Christ, we go back and put the meaning there because we see Christ. But remember, they don't know about the Messiah or the Christ. Even when they were in the, remember when we did the prophetic readings and the people were in captivity and things were going bad, the place was crumbling, and we went back and said, remember, there's going to be someone who comes. There's going to be a blessing that comes through. They didn't get that until after Christ came. When Christ came, then it all lined up. You know what? That's the way it's going to be for us at the end of time. There's a lot of that stuff in Revelation or stuff that John or Ezekiel that we go, whirling, what? Lights there? We like, okay, you know, we don't necessarily know what that means. And we're going to be the same way. It's this kind of passage now, we read it. When we read it, we understand it. It says, all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. So we know that that's because that line of Christ is coming there, and everyone is going to be blessed because of that. But they had no idea what that meant. And it was in each of their blessings about what's going to happen in the future. And the reason I point that out is because I feel like that's the way we are now, Eve. We have things we don't understand, and they're like part of a blessing that we do understand. They're little pieces and go, that's odd. And then as things happen and they fall into place, we go, oh, of course, that's what that means. And that's what's happening here. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Okay, now Jacob, he's quite a noble guy, isn't he? He's somebody that we all want to be like? No, he's not. So before we read his response, what do you think his response should be? Yes, Lord, I humbly submit to your plan for my life and what's going to happen. No, remember, his name means deceiver. Watch what he says. At first, he starts out pretty good. When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. He was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head, and he set it up as a pillar and poured oil on it. He called that place Bethel, though the city used to be called Luz. So Bethel, Beth means house, like Bethlehem means house. Bethlehem is house of bread. Bethel is house of God. So he sets up a pillar, he sets it up, and that now is known as Bethel, and that's the city there. Okay, so then Jacob made a vow. Okay, so far he's doing okay. I don't know about the whole rock with the oil. He shouldn't be like anointing a rock. That whole thing is not in alignment, right? But it gets worse. So just in case you had high expectations. Then Jacob made a vow saying, if God will be with me, get this? If God will be with me and will watch over me. Didn't God just tell him he was going to? On this journey I am taking, and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I can return safely to my father's house, then the Lord will be my God. And this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give you a... God's going, oy vey. What in the world? What in the world? I know, the rock probably hit him
like
on.
a little kid who divides cookies between his brother.
Yeah, he's turned it into a conditional response. Was God's covenant conditional?
No.
He says, this is what's going to happen. So God, by his power, is going to make it happen the same way that he controlled the ability of the men in that one city to have any kind of sexual relations until they got out of there, so that it wouldn't work out the way that it doesn't work out. God goes in and makes sure what happens to accomplish his purpose. Whether you're a Jacob or an Esau or an Isaac or an Abraham, he's going to make certain things happen. So Christ is going to come at an appointed time and hour that God has decided, because God decided it, period. It has nothing to do with us and how we react. Now, on the other hand, he does want us to be a part of that. But those events are going to happen regardless of us. Okay, chapter 29. Let's see if anything gets better. Well, he's going to learn some hard lessons. And they're going to be taught by God and his wives. They're going to teach him a few things. Then Jacob continued on his journey and came to the land of the eastern peoples. There he saw a well in the field with 3 flocks of sheep lying near it, because the flocks were watered from the well. The stone over the mouth of the well was large. When all the flocks gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone away from the well's mouth and water the sheep. Then they would return to the stone to its place over the mouth of the well. So it's a big, heavy rock. It covers the well to keep it protected from animals that might try to, if you had a regular cover, something might scratch through that or pull that off, right? And also, it holds you accountable. If you have to wait till all the shepherds get there, because the rock is too big for you to move by yourself. So you wait till everyone gets there, and then they move it. Then everybody gets some water, right? If someone came earlier and got their water, and then you came later, some people might miss out on the water. So it was like this whole kind of thing. You would wait until everyone arrived, and then you'd all move the rock and get some water. You need to remember that. That's what they were supposed to be doing. That's why they were gathered there. That's not what happens. Verse 4, Jacob asked the shepherds, "My brothers, where are you from?" "We're from Haran," they replied. Ding, 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 ding. He said to them, "Do you know Laban, Nahor's grandson?" There you go. He's going to find out now, right, if this is family. "Yes, we know him," they answered. Then Jacob asked him, "Is he well?" "Yes, he is," they said. "And here comes his daughter Rachel with the sheep." "Look," he said, "the sun is still high. It is not time for the flocks to be gathered. Water the sheep and take them back to pasture." "We can't," they replied, "until all the flocks are gathered and the stone has been rolled away from the mouth of the well. Then we will water the sheep." While he was still talking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. When Jacob saw Rachel, daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and Laban's sheep, he went over and rolled the stone away from the mouth of the well. Oh, she's a good looker. Hey, let me go over and move this rock, right? Yeah. He was strong and he was trying to prove something. We've all seen teenagers do that, right? Let me show you how. I'll move this rock. Then Jacob kissed Rachel. Now, that would normally be a little offensive, but she's a relative, and that's the way you greeted relatives. But it was awkward and offensive. That was not proper protocol. This is one of those things where you have a kissing cousin and they take advantage of kissing you and you're wondering, you just, getting a free kiss?
And then kissing and then
Kissing, like some men will linger their hand a little too long or whatever, and you go, oh, wait a minute, that's really odd. That's the way this is. The way this is written, if you were in this culture, the way that he did that with just moving the rock himself, it's like you would see that this is not the right way. And while it was okay, it wasn't like an offense for him to kiss her because she was a relative, but still, it's like, come on, you don't even know me, right? Verse 13, as soon as Laban, let's go back. It says, then Jacob kissed Rachel and began to weep aloud. He had told Rachel that he was a relative of her father and a son of Rebekah, so she ran and told her father. As soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he hurried to meet him. He embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his home, and there Jacob told him all these things. Then Laban said to him, you are my own flesh and blood. So Jacob really plays this up. Oh, my sister Rebecca, I'm your, blah, 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 blah. We're related. We're family. And he weeps that he's found his family. And so then Laban comes running, and what's Laban do? The same thing. Oh, Jacob, it's so good to see you. I've never met you before, and I don't even halfway know you. But anyway, we're so glad to see you. Please come in. Why? Because they're looking for what they're going to gain by this interaction. They're really playing it up for that. Poor Jacob's going to learn a few lessons here. After Jacob had stayed with them for a whole month, in other words, a week or two might have been, but a month, Laban said to him, now here's the character of Laban. Just because you are a relative of mine, should you work for me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be. Now, has he been working for him? He's not employed by him. Oh, but now he's going to be employed by him. Laban's going to make it. He's casting this into the idea that you're working for me. That's something he's bringing into the pot. Now, Laban had two daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel was lovely in form and beautiful. Jacob was in love with Rachel and said, I'll work for 7 years in return for your younger daughter, Rachel. Laban said, it's better that I give her to you than to come to some other man. You're better than anybody else. Stay here with me. So Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel, but they seemed like only a few days to him because his love for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife. My time is completed and I want to lie with her. The actual words are, let me enter her. So he was ready to do the deed and he was tired of waiting. It was time. He said it's time. But it's kind of a coarse way of saying it is what I'm saying. It was a very coarse way of saying it. Verse 22, so Laban brought together all the people of the place and gave a feast. But when evening came, he took his daughter Leah and gave her to Jacob, and Jacob lay with her. And Laban gave his servant girl Zilpah to his daughter as her maidservant. So he would not know that this was Leah because the garment they wear is head to toe, all completely veiled, they're completely black and completely veiled. And then they party until late evening. They go into a dark tent. So it would be that it's very possible that he would not know who that was. And it probably wasn't much talking. When morning came, there was Leah. So Jacob said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me?" Laban replied, "It is not our custom to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one." Okay, now go back.
Wow.
It says, I want to show you what it says. But let's keep going on. It is not our custom to give the younger one. Finish this daughter's bridal week. Then we will give you the younger one also in return for another 7 years of work. So he was there a month. He worked 7 years. He married Leah. The custom was they spent a week on honeymoon together, and then they would go back to business. So after the week, the bridal week, then he married Rachel. So 7 years, he married Leah, married Rachel, and then worked another 7 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so a lot of people think that he worked 7 years and got Leah, then he worked another 7 to get Rachel. That's not the way it went. Verse 28, and Jacob did so. He finished the week with Leah, and then Laban gave his daughter Rachel to his wife. Laban gave his servant girl Bilhah to his daughter, Rachel as her maidservant. Jacob lay with Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and he worked for Laban another 7 years. When the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben. Make sure I have this right. For she said, "It is better the Lord has seen my misery. Surely my husband will love me now." Do you recognize the name Reuben? We're now going to see the 12 tribes of Israel get born. Okay? So we start with Reuben, which is the first. She conceived again when she gave birth to a son. She said, "Because the Lord heard that I am not loved, he gave me this one too." So she named him Simeon. Again she conceived, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, "Now at last my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons." So she named him Levi. She conceived again, and she gave birth to a son. She said, "This time I will praise the Lord." So she named him Judah. Then she stopped having children. Some people say that she quit letting Jacob in the tent. Others say that she just quit having children. She just didn't have any more children. The way the wording is here, it's a little bit vague about whether she set some boundaries or what. Chapter 30. When Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she became jealous of her sister. So she said to Jacob, "Give me children or I'll die." What's Jacob going to do about it? Jacob became angry with her and said, "Am I in the place of God? Who has kept you from having children?" Then she said, "Here is Bilhah, my maidservant. Sleep with her, so that she can bear children for me, and that through her I can build a family." So she gave him her servant Bilhah as a wife. Jacob slept with her, and she became pregnant and bore him a son. That's the 5th son. Then Rachel said, "God has vindicated me. He has listened to my plea and given me a son." Because of this, she named him Dan. Rachel's servant Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a 2nd son. Then Rachel said, "I have had a great struggle with my sister. I have won." So she named him Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had stopped having children, she took her maidservant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as wife. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, "What good fortune!" So she named him Gad. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a 2nd son. Then Leah said, "How happy I am! The women will call me happy." So she named him Asher. We're up to 8. During wheat harvest, Reuben went out in the fields. Okay, so we're up to 8.
Yeah.
We've had Leah, Bilhah, and Zilpah. Okay, we don't have any children from Rachel yet.
None.
Okay, so get this thing on mandrakes. You know what a mandrake is?
No,
It's a flower or something.
I'll show you.
it's an aphrodisiac.
It's a root, and it has that appearance that they don't all look this clear. This is the concept, but when you look at the real ones, they're just roots that are kind of shaped like male and females. It looks like, and there's this whole lore that's come on with the mandrake, and we're going to read a little bit about this here. What they think about it's like an aphrodisiac, but it was also medicinal for other purposes. It had a lot of medicinal properties, and over the years they started making these because they look so much like children, they started making these things like that. When you pull them out of the ground, they scream, and if you hear them scream, you go crazy or you die. So then the way to harvest it is the way to harvest the mandrake. Let me read it to you. The first, this is in scripture. The Hebrew word for this plant is dudaim, which means love plant. And in Song of Solomon, you see it in chapter 7, verses 12 and 13. Go and catch a falling star, get with child a mandrake root. Tell me where all the pastures are, or who cleft the devil's foot. So it's like that. So it's like a thing to make you more frisky. So, but Josephus records it, and so that's quite a bit later in time. And at that time, he's the one who says that that the root is that when you pull it up, it makes this loud sound, which will deafen you or make you go crazy, either one. And so the way to harvest it is to tie your dog to the base of the root. He even gives a picture. You're supposed to tie a dog's collar, tie it to the base of the root you're trying to pull up. This is what the plant is a rendering of what it's supposed to look like, and then there's the root. You tie it to the base of the plant, and then the person goes away. So he giving the dog some water. He goes away and then call the dog. And when the dog comes, he'll pull out the root, and the dog will die, but you'll get your mandrake. The dog will die because the mandrake will scream loud, and the dog will go crazy and die. That's the myth. That's the myth surrounding it by the time of Josephus. Okay. Now, just in case, what is in Scripture is that they would go get the mandrake, and it appears here to be so that she will be with child. So we know it had medicinal purposes, but by the time of Josephus, we're getting this story about they scream. And in case you want to know, does that carry on to current day? In J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Harry Potter in his second year with his classmates at Hogwarts wears earmuffs while repotting young mandrakes. So that's how these rumors get started and passed along, right? Okay. Okay, back here to the mandrake. So when Leah wanted to me, you must sleep. Okay, verse 15. But she said to her, wasn't it enough that you took away my husband? Will you take my son's mandrakes too? Very well, Rachel said. He can sleep with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes. So Rachel wants the mandrakes. So when Jacob came in from the fields that evening, Leah went out to meet him. You must sleep with me, she said. I have hired you with my son's mandrakes.
That sounds odd.
I know. So he slept with her that night. God listened to Leah, and she became pregnant and bore Jacob a fifth son. That's, Then Leah said, God has rewarded me for giving my maidservant to my husband, so she named him Issachar. Leah conceived again, that's 9, we're at 9. Again, and bore Jacob his sixth son. Then Leah said, God has presented me with a precious gift. This time my husband will treat me with honor, because I have borne him 6 sons, so she named him Zebulun. Sometime later, she gave birth to a daughter and named her Dinah. So she had the boys, and then the 6 sons, and then 1 girl. Then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and opened her womb. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son and said, God has taken away my disgrace. She named him Joseph and said, may the Lord add to me another son. So we have now we have Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Dinah, the girl, and Joseph. So Joseph would be 11 sons. And and so we have then a very happy family, and you can see Jacob has changed and is a new person now, and becoming better and better. And the wives are very nice to be around. Wouldn't you like to be around that group? Can you see why we read Hebrews 11 first? To recognize that God is doing a work and he's protecting his work. And they don't know it, but these are going to end up being the 12 tribes of Israel. These are going to Joseph is going to be a major character in this. Later, we're gonna see, in the next section, we're gonna see Jacob have a change of heart and actually appear to learn something from his lessons from his life. But we're still left with a lot of gaps that need filled. So, anybody have any comments they want to make on Jacob or his situation?
He was a busy man.
He was a busy man.
And there were more maids, huh?
Yeah, really.
Yeah. What'd you think? You look like you're about to say something.
I'm just thinking about it through, Judah, the Messiah line would be. Jacob wanted Rachel,
Yeah.
but the line came through Leah, who deceived him to go, I mean, she had to be in on it to go into the,
Obviously.
God works in mysterious ways.
He does.
But,